All right, let's get started.
Okay.
So I'm so excited to be here with everyone today. Just let me know, I want to make sure that once we get on this here that you can see my screen and that it's filling up the screen except for my face. Is that good? You can see my face and the slide? Thumbs up? Yep, okay, great, thank you. All right, so today we're going to talk about how to keep it flying, Japanese language program advocacy. Like Laura said, I'm a supervisor for New Haven Public Schools, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second. I'm also president-elect for ACTFL, so I'll be president next year when our conference is going to be in San Diego, and I'm really looking forward to that. And you can follow me on Twitter at jhaxhi, H-A-X-H-I. That's an Albanian last name. My husband is Albanian. It does mean that I'm Haxhi-Sensei, which gave me my doctorate very quickly and easily. And this is my Gmail if you want to contact me. Oops. Oh. So all of the documents I'm going to talk about today are mentioned in your handout. You'll be able to get to them through your handout, and I'll also give you a folder with all of them in it at the end of the presentation, so don't worry. I don't have the slides for you because I actually have everything else is written out for you, so it's actually better than having the slides. So we already said a little bit of our hellos. Hajimemashite, yoroshiku onegaishimasu. I'm really excited to be with you today. I see that we have a wonderful mix of a lot of university professors. We have high school teachers. We have JLEAP folks here from the Laurasian Institution. And we have part-time teachers as well as full-time teachers. I believe Susan Schmidt might be joining us from AATJ. And we have also Satsutani-sensei, I believe, is still on the board of AATJ. Is that correct? I think so. And do we have any elementary school teachers? If you just unmute yourself and yell, hello.
Hello, I do.
Elementary?
I do. Yes, I do K8.
All right, excellent. Okay, so we have every level represented. That's wonderful. All right, so we're gonna mute. I'm sorry to mute everyone. It's just that it's difficult if all of us have our dogs barking and our kids yelling and everything, because I know that's my house for sure. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about myself. I grew up in Connecticut and I studied at Duke University. And while I was at Duke, I went to Kansai Gaidai in Hirakatashi, Osaka. And then after college, I actually went back to Japan as a JET, also in Osaka, in Hirakatashi. And I did some graduate work at Indiana University with Hanabusa-sensei. Woohoo! And since then, I have been teaching in Connecticut, in Waterbury, Connecticut. If you've ever driven through Massachusetts to New York, you'll pass Waterbury, and that's where I live. I taught there for 20 years in a pre-K through 5 Japanese program. And it's a very urban district, so it was very difficult to keep a Japanese program going. We had to do a lot of advocacy, a lot of Board of Education presentations, constant. And I'm happy to say that that program continues. It's 25 years old now, no, maybe 26 years old now. And Kazumi Yamashita Iverson, you might know her. She also is at AATJ, and she is keeping that program going even today. So that's pre-K through 5. For the past 7 years, I've been a supervisor in New Haven, Connecticut. I don't have Japanese teachers working under me, but I do have Arabic, Chinese, Latin, Italian, French, and Spanish teachers. And we have about 90 teachers in a school district with 43 schools. And that's also the district where Yale University is. So it's been very lucky to be very supported there with lots of culture and lots of language. So that's where I work now. Oops. So I needed to show you these pictures because you're going to hear a lot about airplanes in this presentation. And this is one of my favorite presentations because I can combine my hobby with my work. So since I was a child, I've been flying Rajikon no Mokei Hikoki, radio-controlled model airplanes with my father. And I also flew them in Japan when I was there. And it's one of the things that helped me learn a lot of Japanese because none of the men who flew model airplanes spoke English. So it was really good for me. So I flew on a racing team that was sponsored by actually a Japanese gentleman in my college and high school years competitively. And then this is me and my dad recently. So that's why I kind of like airplanes, and you're going to hear a lot about airplanes today. So I'd like to hear a little bit more from you, or you can just silently take notes on this part. Sit and pause for a moment. This is on your handout if you want to take notes or write your thoughts. Why should people learn other languages? If someone asks you that in an elevator, you know, back when we can take elevators together again, right? And someone says, why even learn other languages? Everybody speaks English in the world, don't they? Don't all the Japanese people speak English? Doesn't everybody speak English around the world? Why should we learn other languages? So take a minute and just quietly write some notes. And when you're ready, why don't you type a few answers in the chat if you'd like. And if you finish that, you can start working on the next one. Why should people learn Japanese? So I think Laura or one of you guys, I'm gonna need your help because I, for some reason, cannot see the chat right now.
Yes, what do you need us? Oh,
So
to
can you just,
read things.
yeah, I think so. Can you just read some of the answers that you're seeing?
Yeah, so from Ia, to show that you can learn about other cultures, language is just, whoa, too many. Let's see here. Let me get back to it. Language is just one aspect of someone's culture. Manami-san said to be open-minded. Tepe said learning empathy, intercultural sensitivity. From Ann Jordan, to make the world a kinder place, to develop empathy and understanding. From Joyce Beitel, everyone is more connected with the internet. Languages and culture are very connected.
Beautiful. So now take a second and answer this question for yourself. Why should people learn Japanese? So Laura, are there any chats popping up on that one?
Not yet
People
on
still
this
thinking.
one. There are two more new ones from the previous question. From Akiko-san, communicate with others and learn from each other. Rebecca also said to get access to more of the entertainment you enjoy. And from someone who their name is Laptop, if you could tell me who you are so that I can change your name accordingly, because we're not sure who you are. They said, in order to broaden your perspectives and insights to understand different ways of thinking of Japanese culture, etc. Alexandria Maurer, oh, that was my previous last name. Door to another world, another culture, something completely different from one's own. Manami-san said is a special culture. Rebecca said, for English speakers, because the culture is so different from where you grew up, it will make you notice things about your own perspective.
Oh,
I agree. That's what really brought me into Japanese, was just the amazing difference between America and Japan and the two languages. Satsutani-san said, want to become friends. Laptop is, oh, Yoko Hagihara Zol. Oh, okay. I'm going to change your name then. Ia also said that Japanese is very different from English.
Nice.
I'm going to pipe in on the Ohio side. In Ohio, we have a great need of Japanese because we have so many of the Japanese companies, for example, Honda and all of the suppliers to Honda. In Indiana, we actually have a Subaru plant. In Michigan, I believe we have a Toyota, but somebody might need to correct me if I'm wrong. So we have a lot nearby, especially for Japanese companies, and they do usually say that they want people who understand the culture at least, if
Great.
not have a little bit of Japanese language training.
Great. And actually, I figured out now how to see the chat. So I
Oh, you
see
can see it.
there's Toyota in Cincinnati and in Kentucky. Wow, great.
Yeah.
For the economy. So yeah, all those answers are beautiful and wonderful. And the reason we do this is because we need to have those answers ready. So if you've never done it before, when we finish today, take a few moments to write out your answer to that question, because that's the kind of question that should be automatic, answer that should be automatic for you. If someone says to you, Japanese, like who's learning Japanese? Why do they want to learn Japanese? Those answers need to be quick and ready for you, because that's really the core of advocacy. And as Japanese teachers, we need to advocate for Japanese. As world language teachers, we need to know how to advocate for world languages in general. And both of those are special skills that we're going to try to develop today. So we're gonna keep moving on, but if you think of more things that you'd like to share, feel free to put them in the chat. So today we're going to think of your Japanese program as being like this airplane, surprise, surprise. So this is your Japanese program, happily flying through the air. As you can see, we have a combination of Nihongo and the Japanese flag and love, because we want our students to think of it as something they absolutely love. So if this is our Japanese programs, then you are the pilot of these programs. You are the one controlling where the plane goes. And we're going to think in that way throughout today. You are the pilot. So you sit here and you fly the plane that is your Japanese program. This is the cockpit looking out the window. So as a pilot, there are things that you can control and things that you cannot control. When you're flying an airplane, the things you can't control, you cannot control, are the design of the plane. You might have a big plane, a small plane, a fast plane, a slow plane, a pretty plane, an ugly plane. You can't control that really, unless you build it yourself like my father does, but normally you can't. You can't control the flight schedule. They tell you when you're going to be taking off and landing, right, at the airports. You can't control who the passengers are that come on your airplane. You can't control what the weather's going to do on each given day. But as a pilot, you can control the direction the airplane goes. You're doing the flying. You can control how high you go up in the air. You can control how smooth the flight is. So whether the flight's going to have a lot of turbulence or whether the flight is going to be nice and smooth and with smooth movements as the pilot flies it versus you don't want a pilot that flies like that. And you can control how long you stay in the air. Only the pilot can make an airplane land. And only, well, we'll talk about that in a second. So now let's take that analogy of the pilot and the airplane and apply it to our Japanese programs. So let's look at those things you can't control. And I put the word necessarily here because sometimes you can control some of these things, but most of the time you cannot. So a pilot cannot control the design of the airplane. The design of the airplane is the design of your program. So usually, most of us are in programs that were designed by the school district or were designed by an administrator or someone. You may or may not have a lot of input into what your program looks like, how many levels, how many students, how many minutes, but that's next. So the schedule of the program is like your flight schedule. You have no control usually over saying how often your classes will meet, how many minutes long the schedule is. Sometimes you do. At the elementary, sometimes we were able to make our schedules, but there were a lot of parts of it that were not in our control. You really don't have control over who your passengers are, and those are your students. You can advocate and get more students in, but often for most of us, whoever shows up in our classroom, those are our passengers for the year. And we can't really say, and we should not be saying, you stay, you go. I've never really seen Japanese teachers do this, but I will say that in the other languages as a supervisor, I do still see a lot of that old-fashioned idea that only smart kids can learn languages, which was popular when I was young, that like, you know, only honor students, or you still even hear this from a lot of people, oh, they don't speak English well, so they shouldn't be in Japanese class. But in fact, my students who were bilingual, Spanish-English, were some of my best Japanese students. And they loved Japanese class because they were good at languages, even though they were struggling in other subjects because their English was not so good. So we can't really control who they are, but we also don't want to be controlling who comes in our class. We need to be very accepting of everyone. And for us, the weather as pilots is the environment. But it means the school environment, the local community environment, the political environment, and the funding environment. For the most part, these things are not within our control unless we're the ones applying for grants or things like that. But even if they are, there's a lot of this stuff that is not stuff that we can control. Now, happily, there's a lot that we can probably control ourselves. Number one, the path we take as pilots, as we're flying the airplane. That's our curriculum. So we usually have quite a bit of control over that as Japanese teachers especially. Often other subject areas have more teachers of the same language, so there's a lot more back and forth, but we often have quite a bit of control over curriculum. How high our program flies is really our assessment and our outcomes. What we can show the students that they can accomplish is going to determine how high your program goes, how well you do. How smooth your flight is as a pilot is your instruction. The quality of your instruction is going to affect how smooth or how rough and difficult your flight is with these passengers, these students that you have for the year. And this is my favorite one. How long you stay in the air is really your advocacy. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. So today, we're gonna take all of these things you can't control and stop thinking about them and stop worrying about them. And we're just gonna focus on the things that we can control, which are curriculum, assessment, outcomes, instruction, and advocacy. So first, we're gonna talk a little bit about these first three here, because I used to just do presentations on advocacy only. And the truth is that I've realized over the years is that no amount of advocacy that you do, no amount of newsletters and events and public relations and all that is going to do you any good if you don't have these three things in place. And I know a lot of you already do. A lot of you are very, very experienced teachers, so you've already done a lot of this. But I think all of us, including me, I'm always learning new things in each of these areas. And I think it's always worth returning to them, because no matter how good these things were 10 years ago, the kids keep changing. And so these things need to be updated, all of them. And now, of course, now that we're all teaching online, everything changes again. So revisiting these things often and thinking about some of the things we're about to talk about, I think is essential. Because if you have these three things, even if you don't do a lot of advocacy, you'll still have a lot of students who stay with you because these things are strong. Everybody doing good? Thumbs up? Okay. I mean, I can't get over it. I love the Totoro background. Love it. Okay, got to figure out how to do that. So let's talk about curriculum. Curriculum that advocates, right? So curriculum is the direction we're going to fly these kids throughout the year. Curriculum that advocates is curriculum that is written down and shared with everyone so that kids can see it, parents can see it, administrators can see it. Curriculum that advocates is designed backwards. And we'll talk more about that in the documents I'm going to give you, but I'm sure you've heard of backwards design by now, and if not, I have resources for you in the documents, but it's making sure that you're teaching with the end in mind. So your units start with what you want them to know by the end, and your levels You know what students will know by the end of each level, and you teach backwards from that, knowing where you want them to go, like a clear roadmap. They're standards-based, so incorporating the 5 C's in your curriculum. They're proficiency-based, meaning that you have clear proficiency targets based in the proficiency guidelines for your levels and your units. Your curriculum is articulated through the levels. So this one's a challenge if you have teachers teaching under you, below you in levels, and above you in levels. And even from high school to college, this is something that we all have as a challenge. We need students to learn what they need for the next year, and we need the next year's teacher to believe that they've learned it and to appreciate that they've learned it. And we need them to get credit for having done the levels before. The worst thing we can do as Japanese teachers as a field is to have students take it in high school and then not get credit for it in college and have to start over. Things like that, or take it in middle school or take it in elementary and not get credit for it. That is the worst thing we can do to each other as a field. And eventually the kids will just give up. And it'll only take a couple years for those upper kids to tell the lower kids, don't bother, you don't get credit. So it's really important. Oh, I got a big yes on that one. It needs to be spiraled so that students are constantly reviewing and adding on, reviewing and adding on, reviewing and adding on. If it's always new content, you're really not developing proficiency. If it's always review, then you're not doing anything to excite kids and push them forward. But you know that. It needs to be relevant and engaging to students. And by relevant, I mean it speaks to what they care about learning now. So it needs to be things that they're interested in talking about. It needs to be using technology they're interested in using. And those are the things that create engagement. Culture is where it's at, especially for Japanese. As we all know, this is stating the obvious, Japanese culture is what brings kids to our programs, and it has for years, right? Anime, manga, all of it is sushi, all of it. I remember 30 years ago, we couldn't get a kid to eat a sushi roll when I would make it. I would make cucumber sushi, and all the kids would throw out the nori and eat the rice and the cucumber and walk out. I couldn't believe, I would spend, hours and lots of money back then. And now they all want it all the time. Lots of culture every unit, culture as much as possible. And not just those big C type culture things that we always talk about, but deep culturally stuff too, that you can learn about by looking at the ICC statements, the intercultural communication statements. That's in your resources also. And the curriculum that advocates is based in real world tasks and skills. Students today are not going to sit there and do a task that is not, does not make sense in the real world. It's not something that they could ever see themselves doing in the real world. This is a generation that understands what's going on in the real world, and they will completely disengage if they think something is not useful to them. So that's curriculum. Now let's talk about assessments. So assessments that advocate are determining how high your program can fly. So you can have a great curriculum with excellent instruction and good advocacy actually, but you're never really taking your program as high as it can go if you aren't using assessment and outcomes in the way, in a maximized way. So your assessments need to be based on proficiency targets. You're going to assess based on their performances, right? But you always need to have in mind what's the proficiency target for that level. There's a lot of resources for you to learn about that in our later documents. We want to be assessing in all 3 modes of communication. And if you need more information on what those are, there's resources that I'll be giving you. But basically, interpretive mode, right? We need to be assessing their reading and listening skills. Interpersonal mode, they're speaking spontaneously, negotiating meaning skills, and by texting and other quick interpersonal writing, and also presentational speaking and writing. In the old days, a lot of us, all of us, really did a lot of maybe interpretive, maybe, and a lot of presentational stuff. So if you're thinking of one to focus on for a year, interpersonal is a great place to look, because that's often the one that we think we're doing well, and we might not be doing as well as we can. The assessments have to be relevant and engaging. Kids are not going to engage anymore with just a fill-in-the-blank assessment, which, by the way, a fill-in-the-blank assessment is not any of the modes. It's just a fill-in-the-blank. It doesn't really teach you about their real-world skills. So think about, is this assessment engaging? Ways to make assessments engaging are use of technology or adding something fun to it. Even if they have to make a speech, maybe let them use Flipgrid to record it or something to record it, and let them put a funny avatar on their face. Something tiny like that can turn an assessment from boring to engaging for students. Real world tasks and skills. The best assessments ask students to do something that is grounded in the real world, that they might actually ask to do in the real world. Write an email to a potential employer. Look at this Japanese movie poster and figure out what time it is and how much it is. Call me and pretend you're asking for a reservation at a restaurant. Things that they might really want to do. The best assessments show us students what they know, but also give them opportunities to go farther. So if you use rubrics that have, say, meets expectations, you always want to have the ability for the student to go past that, to exceeds. What if they added some more vocabulary, or if they used some expressions that they don't always use in class, and maybe some extra expressions, or if they use vocabulary from a previous unit, maybe they get a higher score. And we want to make sure that assessments give students high quality feedback. So interpretive assessments are also often at that, you get 100 level, right? But, and that's fine, but as you move into interpersonal and presentational assessments, students need to know what they did, how well they did, and what they need to do better next time to move up the next level. And you need good data also. So when you design an assessment, take a look at it and think, is this going to tell me anything about what to teach next or what they didn't know? So that's a really important filter to put your assessments through. If all of these things in place, then the assessments are helping you be a good advocate, because it's showing students where they are. It's showing students how well they're doing because of your program and your teaching. And finally, to the extent that you can, if you can get your assessments written down and able to be shared, at least a summary of what it is, like a little introduction, that's very helpful too, to show your administrators and to show students, and students can show their parents. So outcomes are similar to assessments, but outcomes are more like, where are they at the end of certain points? So the key to outcomes is that your program has to be proficiency based. You have to think about what is their ability to use the language in the real world when they leave my class or my program. And we have to celebrate all those milestones, right? So students need to see that there's the potential to get AP scores, to get the seal of biliteracy, to be in Japanese National Honor Society, to be in Japan Club, to do the Nengajo contest, and constant just celebration, celebration, celebration of these things. And those celebrations will link with the advocacy events that you want to be doing, but they're celebrating something that is actually a language outcome from your program. So these kinds of outcomes are really key to both advocacy and the advocacy of language proficiency. And all information about all of those will be in the documents you get. So instruction that advocates is probably the thing that we have the absolute most control over, right? So our instruction, and I mean, I can tell you, and I know Haxhi-Sensei is here, I have never had a bad Japanese teacher in my entire college career, even 30 years ago back at Duke and at Kansai Gaide. So I know that most of you are doing all of these things. But like I said, I am always learning more about how to engage students, how to instruct. So I think it's always worth revisiting these things. The best instruction is relevant, engaging, has real world tasks and skills again. So even if you're practicing restaurant, have some, you know, pictures of food or plastic food or whatever, and let them practice what it's like to be in a restaurant, and practice eating and practice saying itadakimasu and all kinds of things. At every level, even in college, I would be using all kinds of manipulatives, all kinds of real world tasks. Authentic resources are the absolute key to engaging students at this point. Kids can access all this stuff on their own. They've seen a lot of it. If you can find TikTok videos from Japan, if you can find Japanese McDonald's commercials, like, you know, I see a lot of people nodding. I know you're doing this, but authentic texts, video, text, and realia, like, you know, toys, Japanese toys, actual chopsticks, all those things are the things that engage the students. Pace is really key to high quality instruction that not only keeps them engaged, but helps you with class management. The faster you can teach, but still give them the input they need to be successful, the less class management problems you will have and the more engaged students will be. They need to feel like the minute they walk in your classroom, it is, let's go, let's go, let's go. I don't have time to waste, let's go. And it's hard to do every day because you have to be so well prepared for live classes in order to do that. But preparation is really the key to pace. So if you have all your stuff ready to go, then you can keep up that good pace. Scaffolding is another thing that is one of these education words that's sort of difficult to think about. But what it really means is you give students the resources or the background or the hints they need to be able to do the thing you're asking them to do. So you don't want students, let's put it this way. If a student comes up to you and says, Miss, I have no idea how to do this, like what? Like if they're completely lost, chances are that activity hasn't been scaffolded. They haven't gotten either the background knowledge or the hints or the resource or the picture dictionary or whatever it is, or the sentence starter that they need to do the task. And what that leads to is frustration, and then they don't like Japanese class. So it's actually an extremely important thing to think about. If you're using technology, use it to enhance your lessons. And especially now, like, I know it's so tempting to use every single new thing that you're seeing come across your desk, but I think it's really better to just focus on the things that work the best for you, and then maybe add a new one every couple of weeks, but use it to enhance and engage. Don't just use it for the sake of using it. If it's some new thing everybody else is using, you know, could be, you name it, Pear Deck, Edpuzzle. I mean, they're all wonderful, but it has to work with your teaching style and enhance your instruction and not make it more difficult for you to manage it. This is probably the most important thing on the whole page. I should have put it in bold, but students need to have opportunities to feel successful in Japanese class every single day, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So even on day one, if you're saying konnichiwa, 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 namae wa, namae, you have to be passionately showing that you're pleased with their responses. And if they can't respond, if you say like something like nansai desu ka, and maybe they learned that 2 months ago, they've already, you know, every day you say nansai desu ka, and then the student looks at you like, we must in that moment say, oh, 10歳, 11歳, 12歳, like give them a choice or have the numbers on the board. I always tell this story, but as you know, colors in Japanese are pretty challenging because there's not that many cognates and they just don't sound anything like English or Spanish or any of the other languages the kids know. So like every year in 3rd grade, we did this unit with suitcases before we fly to Japan, and we color our suitcases. And I would say and I had a poster that had akai, aoi, kiroi, kuroi, midori no. Oh, then it said midori no, orange no, like, so it had the e adjectives and the no adjectives. And then I would say to every kid, I'd say, nimotsu wa nani iru desu ka? And the kid would look at me, and I would look at him, and then I would have to say all the choices and point, because it was colored. They were colored choices. I would say akai, aoi, kiroi, kuroi, and I would point, and that kid would say, oh, akai nimotsu, or whatever. And then I would go to the very next kid 4 seconds later, and I would say, nimotsu nani iro desu ka? And the kid would look at me like, okay, and I have to say all the choices over. That poster is like in my brain forever. I think I said it 4,000 times because I had 300 students a year. So I probably said it 4,000 times in 20 years. But the key was keep smiling. And you never can be like, oh, you're supposed to know this. I taught this to you last, like, you can't, you just can't, because you're the Japanese teacher in an urban district where they will cut you in 5 seconds if the kids hate the class. And not only that, it's just not nice to the kids. But really, I know it takes patience, and I know all of you have lots of patience. I know my Japanese teachers had lots of patience with me, but success, 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 and especially at the lower levels, because the only way that these, and I think this is on here. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna go back. The only way that students will, sorry, oh, I got myself messed up. There we go. The only way that students will continue in Japanese is if they fall in love with it at the younger levels, or the lower levels, I should say, sorry, right? So if they fall in love in level 1 and 2 or in elementary, then we can keep them, and then we can get mean about characters and read, and really then they can do the hard work of level 3 and above. But really, and I say this to my Chinese teachers and my Arabic teachers and even my Spanish teachers, level 1, in my opinion, is helping students fall in love with that language and feel success every day. Success, success, success. Okay, that's my big speech. You need to provide a balance of input, so lots of input, so that students have something to cling to when it's time for output. And I know that sounds very simplistic, but the truth is that I observe teachers every day. I have 90 teachers, and I often see moments where teachers give students, a vocabulary list and sentence starters and expect them to produce language when they have never heard those sentences spoken or read those sentences written. So if your students are having trouble with production, output, go back and make sure you've given them lots of ways to hear the input. Maybe you say a sentence and they have to match it to a picture, or maybe they read a sentence, they have to match it to a picture, or maybe they listen to a commercial that has lots of those similar structures in it. But also don't forget about output, right? So input alone is not enough. Students need opportunities for output that gets them success. So they say something, they ask for something. Every single time they need a pencil, they should be saying, "Enpitsu kudasai," or if they need to go to the bathroom, they should be saying, "Sumimasen, toire ii desu ka?" You can teach all those things early, so they're constantly having to use output to get things done. And not only that, but output with all the things you're learning in your units, not just classroom expressions. All right, and lots of culture. Again, culture is the key to their hearts. So now we've talked about curriculum, assessments, outcomes, and instruction. And now we're just going to move into what you can do in terms of advocacy. So let's take a second and look at the word advocacy in Japanese, right? So this is what's keeping our airplane in the air. So this was the most fun thing I ever discovered. And I think Susan's on now and she remembers back when I discovered this. I think she remembers. It's advocacy in Japanese. We often use this term, this suishin katsudo term. And so when I learned that, or Susan taught me it, or someone taught me it, or maybe it was Tosaku-sensei, and I went back and I've got my good old Nelson's dictionary out, and I looked up the kanji for this term. And I found that this part of it means propulsion, or drive, or promotion in English. And interestingly, this, a suishinki, is a propeller. So that's where this whole crazy notion of our Japanese programs as an airplane started for me. And so advocacy is the propeller that is propelling your program forward. And now why does that mean it's keeping it in the air? So for that, you need to know one more little piece about flying. Interestingly, when you want to land an airplane, you don't just point it down. What you actually do is you cut the throttle. so that the propeller goes slower and it stops. And when I was learning to fly, okay, hikoki, my father used to take me out and just chop the throttle to nothing when I was flying so that I could learn how to land with no throttle. Because if you chop the throttle and the propeller stops, of course you can't keep flying, but the plane just doesn't go like this, you know, the plane will come around and you have to land it. So the point I'm making is, if advocacy is your propeller, then if you stop doing advocacy, you can glide for a little while. Like, you really can. You can get away with it. But your program will start slowly coming down. And I think for me, that's the best analogy. And we've seen it happen. We saw it happen at my school at in Waterbury. We stopped for a while, and we got kind of lazy. We stopped doing some of the stuff, the events and things. And all of a sudden, the first grade teachers decided that there should not be Japanese anymore. Like, it was too much for them to bring the kid, you know. So those kinds of things, you never know where it's going to come from. You never know when funding is going to become an issue. So advocacy is just a propeller that you have to keep spinning. So let's look at that. Who do we advocate to? To whom should we advocate in proper English? So there's really 6 stakeholders. We've got students, parents, colleagues, that one might surprise you, administrators, the board, or you might have something else, it might be called something else, like a regional something, or other people have different names for it, but in Connecticut, we have boards of education that actually make curricular decisions and make certainly funding decisions, and the local community as well, because they can influence the Board of Education. So let's take these one by one, and let's talk about students first. So advocacy to students is about the things we just talked about, having high quality in curriculum, instruction, and assessments and outcomes. And especially the outcomes that matter to them. They want to see it on their transcript. They want to have they want to be proficient. They want to be able to speak. If you survey your students, I suggest you, if you don't, please try. Almost all students will always say the number one reason they're there is to learn to speak. They won't say read, they won't say write, they will say speak. So those are outcomes that matter to students. Not that you shouldn't do the others, but students need to see speaking being developed. Sealed by literacy, AP, those things we talked about before. So advocating to students means surveying them. I'm sure a lot of you do this at the beginning of the year and maybe the end of the year. At the beginning of the year, probably to get to know their interests, and at the end of the year, to see their feedback, or even at the end of a unit. If you try a new unit, send them a little survey saying, what'd you think of this? And then take their feedback. And that really makes them feel like they're engaged in part of the conversation. We have to know their interests and incorporate it into instruction. Like we said, they got to feel success every single day in class. They can't be feeling defeated by our classes. They need to feel like they're learning and like they are valued in the classroom. It's really, advocating to students is also about building cultural traditions in your program. So for example, at our school in Waterbury, we put up Hinaningyo every year in March. And that became for the whole month, we would leave them up. And they were a beautiful set that was donated to us. And also we did, Shin Nenkai and Undokai and things like that you consistently do every single year, become a cultural tradition of that school and that program and in those students' minds as much as anything else. Even if you don't have the same students every year, they'll tell their siblings, oh, wait, you're gonna do the pounding the rice, so you're gonna see or they'll walk by your classroom and say, oh my gosh, there's the Hinaningyo. Like, those things really matter. And you just have to help them fall in love with Japan and Japanese, which of course is also things like offering trips to Japan, offering trips to the local Japanese grocery store, restaurants, all those things. So if you're looking at all this and thinking, there's some things I could do better there, this is just a list of some of the kinds of places you can get ideas. for advocating to students. So obviously attending workshops, that's what you guys are doing right now, so well done. There's lots of places you can learn on Twitter. And by the way, all of this is in the resources I'm gonna give you, right? There's some hashtags you can follow. Here's some people you can follow. That's AATJ's Twitter hashtag. And Twitter, I know seems overwhelming, but I've really enjoyed using it. And I use it almost exclusively for professional development for myself. It's where I find people have been posting free things that they've made, especially Leslie Gran right here. She posts amazing resources for world language teachers. Talking to colleagues, Japanese colleagues, but don't forget to talk to colleagues that teach Spanish and French, and they all have something to share with you. Observing other colleagues. If you're having trouble with a particular group of students, engaging them, but you've heard that they love another class, go watch that class. Are they different in that class? What does that teacher do differently? There are also videos like the Annenberg series that you can watch for more ideas. And I hate to say it because I don't do this well anymore, but we have to stay current on Japanese pop culture, anime, manga, music, because those are the kinds of things, if we could find, like I will say again, TikTok. If you're not looking at TikTok or figuring out TikTok right now, then you're missing an opportunity to engage with the kids, because that's all my daughter does all day long at 17 years old, is look at TikTok videos. And you have to stay current on US pop culture also, right? So Instagram, TikTok, again, right? Those are the things that the students will love. And finally, you have to take care of you. So none of us can, this is an exhausting job, exhausting, and we can't do it unless we have sleep and health and exercise and all those things. So don't forget about that. It says Ohio had a meeting with Leslie Graham last week. Yeah, she is amazing. I have her website linked in our documents as well. So let's talk. We're gonna zoom through. We have about 11 more minutes. We're gonna make it through the rest of these and get to your self-assessment. So how do I advocate to parents? Parents, we need to think of being a partner to parents. So we want to often find ways to show them how much their child knows, because they really have no idea. So I don't know about you, but when I asked my daughter, like, what'd you learn today? Especially at the younger grades, she was like, you know, either she says nothing or she said something that I couldn't really get a lot out of it. So we have to have lots of communication with parents about what their kids know. And that might not be traditional. It might not be just a grade. It might be that you forward a video. That's the very best. Or if you do Flipgrid, you know, forward them, ask the students to show their parents their video. This is really important, positive contact. If you have a student you have difficulties with, it's really important that before the negative phone calls start going home, that you have some positive phone calls. So I talk to my teachers all the time about how when I taught on the JET program, the homeroom teachers would visit the homes in Japan for the first few weeks of school. And I told my teachers they don't have to do that, but if they call every house in the first few weeks and just introduce themselves and say, I can't wait to have your child this year. I'm so excited. If you ever need anything, this is my email. That goes a long way in making parents like you and trust you. I don't know about your school districts might be different, but I've taught in only urban environments, and in the urban environments, in a lot of environments though, parents have a negative feeling about school. And especially if their child does not behave, the only thing they get is negative phone calls. So if you can be the person that calls with a positive first, and then maybe even a few more positives, the minute those difficult kids do anything good, then if you ever really need to call, they will trust you and they will back you up. So it's really important. Important to maintain a website. I used to say newsletters only, but at this point, it's pretty easy to make a website, so you should have one. And I have some great an example for you from Kazumi Yamashita Iverson, and perhaps others can share in the documents as well. Newsletters are terrific though too, or updates, anything. Even if you use Remind to text your students, little things to text the parents, little things to parents help. If possible, you can let them help with homework. And it doesn't mean that they have to speak Japanese. It just means they have to be willing to listen to their child speak Japanese. So have the kid perform something and let the parent fill out just a little checklist. My child did this, no problem. My child seemed to need a little help. You know, please help, you know, we had to go online and look something up, whatever it is, and just give the kid 100% credit for that assignment as long as the parent, they do it in front of someone at home. Parent or guardian or friend of the family. And by the way, with that though, don't penalize the kids who don't do it, because sometimes we don't know whether the parents are willing or not to listen. One of the easiest things we ever did for advocacy at Maloney in Waterbury was have parent visitation week. So we used to do lots of big events, and especially events where like all the kids were singing on the stage, or like all these big things that took all this work. And then the parents would only see their child for like 2 minutes to sing a song. What we realized is those events were killing us and the parents weren't getting that much out of it. Whereas, so then we switched to doing more events where the parents were participating with children, like a Shinnenkai where everyone's doing mochitsuki or something. And then instead, and for language, we would just, for one whole week, send the parents the schedule of the classes, tell them they can come anytime they want. So we had the kids 3 times a week. It could be, and then it could be every day. However, you just send them the schedule and then set up chairs in the back of your room and then teach. You're all great teachers. And every English-speaking parent and Spanish-speaking parent and Pashto-speaking parent is going to be amazed to see their child participating in a Japanese class, especially if you use the target language a lot of the time. It's the easiest, best advocacy you can do, and all you have to do is teach pretty good classes for a week. Like, don't have that be a week where you're working on a project. Have it be interactive classes. Invite them to events, so all those events we've been mentioning. Invite them to lunch. So another thing we did that worked really well was twice a year, we did lunch with the senseis, and we just invited everyone to meet us at the local Japanese restaurant. It was hard to find, but we found one that spoke Japanese. We would do a reservation system where they would reserve with us, but then all we would do is tell the restaurant how many people were coming. Toward the end, we also did a pre-ordering thing because it was so many people for the restaurant. We would fill the restaurant. And then the families sat with the family, their own family, and paid themselves. So we never touched money. We never did buses. It was not like a field trip. It was like, meet us at the restaurant. And then we just walked around almost like a wedding. And we went to each table and interacted with the families and would sit down and chat. And it's some of my fondest memories, and I know it did the most for advocacy for our program. And those were some of the families that ended up coming to Japan with us, even though they, from all different socioeconomic levels. You need to be a community member. Even if you don't live in the town you teach in, it's important to try to attend community events like a local fair or whatever it is, and just run into people and be seen. Like, it's just important to be part of the community. And I mean, you just have to keep in mind, whether that student is a great student or a poor student, it's that student's baby and it's that parent's baby. And I didn't really get that 100% until I had my own child. But I think it's really important to keep in mind when you're talking to a parent, like, and you guys are all really good at this, so I don't need to tell you, but even in high school, it's hard to hear criticism of your kid. So we have to be careful as we say it. And finally, survey them. So there's examples of what kinds of surveys you can do for parents in the documents that I'm going to give you. All right, let's talk about colleagues. So what would advocacy to colleagues look like? Well, they are some of the people who can really damage your program from behind the scenes. They might have the ear of the principal or your dean. They might be on committees that are making decisions about funding and programming. So you really do need to make sure that you collaborate with them and are a team player. So you want to share anything that's going on with your program. If you work in a K-8 and you're like dropping kids off, or the teacher's picking the kids up, you want the kids to be quiet when you're done with them, not crazy running around. And you want kids to be on time. If you're in a high school, you want to finish your classes on time so the kids can get to the next one. Those are all the little things that make people dislike you in those environments that will start to make them think, we don't need Japanese. You want to support their content area. So if you do a math lesson in your class because you're working on shopping and the kids are adding up or doing currency conversion, just mention it to the math teacher. Say, hey, oh wow, the kids did so well with that, the math that it took to do currency conversion or conversion from Celsius to Fahrenheit. You guys, you've taught them a lot. Wow. Say stuff like that. I know it's kind of, this, but it's worth it. You can suggest doing interdisciplinary projects together where you do something and then the science teacher or the art teacher does something else. Ask for their advice. Everyone wants to feel like the expert. So if you're having trouble with anything, don't hesitate to reach out and say, hey, do you know how to use, I'm having trouble with this email, or I'm having trouble with Zoom, or whatever it is. And they actually feel more happy about you when they feel like they've taught you something. Share your ideas, articles, lessons. If you find something great, pass it along. Invite them to events, which is important too. Make sure they know, like, hey, we're making sushi ourselves today. Why don't you come over for lunch? Be a team player. If they need stuff done, say yes. I know that it's not like technically part of our jobs, from a union perspective or whatever, to be doing a million different things, but they will keep you at the school if they feel you're indispensable to their team. And we're going to talk about that again with administrators in a second. And you want to survey your colleagues too, to ask them what they think of the program. All right, administrators. I know we're running a little bit, we're getting close to time here. We're almost done. To administrators, you just want to shine. I was trying to think of a word. To me, this is the word. So it's not really bragging. It's not really boasting. It's just be sunshine. If they come to ask you stuff, you want to be positive, happy. Yes. I know this all sounds like, I'm sure the math teacher doesn't have to do this stuff, but we do. So I'm just going to be very real with you. You want to share with them any program, newsletters, websites. They need to constantly be reminded of how much students are learning. So bulletin boards, send them a video that the kids did. If you do a flip grid, send them the flip grid. They don't have to watch it, but keep them informed. If you have a Japanese program, it's fairly unique, so keep them informed. You can share language research when you see new articles come out. By communicate appropriately, I mean, know your administrators. Some administrators don't mind when people come to their door and wait to talk to them. Some administrators prefer an email, and an appointment. Some administrators like to just come visit you in your room. So you need to figure that out, and you don't want to be the person who's bothering them all the time in the wrong way. You want to be the person that they think, oh my God, that Haxhi-Sensei, she is so easy to work with. I love her. I don't ever want to lose her. Invite them to events and let them be the star. So if you take the time, if they come to an event of yours, be sure to say, all of this is possible because we have such great support from Principal Johnson, and let them greet the crowd. They are usually in those positions because they have some type of enjoyment of power or ego or whatever. Let them enjoy it and give them credit for their support. And basically say yes. If they come to you and they ask you to do something, I swear to you, my principal would come, she'd say, Jessica, we have to have something for International Education Day. Can you put something together? I would be like, sure, yes. And then I would turn around and go back to my office and freak out that I was too busy. In front of her, I never, ever, ever said no. And I know that Kazumi, who's still there, does the same thing. And that is what I do in my role as a World Language Administrator in central office. I'm in charge of a lot of things. Like right now, I'm in charge of the whole AP testing because someone needed to do it because we don't have anybody there right now. So I say yes because I feel like that's what builds indispensability. And that's the next word. This is the key. You have to be indispensable to the school. Indispensable means they can't imagine the school without you. And if you make yourself that, then even if you're that because you run the yearbook or the prom or some committee, tenure committees, anything. If you're indispensable in that way, they will think twice about cutting the Japanese program. And survey your administrators. You need to know what they think too. So I'm going to go quickly through these because I want to get to our, this is our last few here, don't worry, sorry. If you have a Board of Education with them, you do want to think about impressing them. You're not going to be interacting with them that often, so you want to know how to communicate with them, and you want to communicate appropriately. Some teachers are allowed to talk directly to the Board of Ed. Some teachers must go through an administrator. So find that out and don't do the wrong thing in terms of communication. You are usually allowed to attend meetings, and you're certainly allowed to watch them on TV. Many are on TV. It's very important to watch and know their politics. You can tell who would support languages and who would not by watching the interactions at a Board of Ed meeting. If you do get to present, if they bring you to present, be very succinct. Go with a one-pager, If you get 10 minutes, use just 10 minutes. Don't go overboard, and emphasize student learning. If you can have a student perform, show a little student video, that's the stuff they want to see. They should have access to your program newsletters and website, whether that's by you sending it or whether it's by you sending it to your principal and saying, would you like to send this to the board? They need to see what students are learning. So especially if you've got AP scores, seal of biliteracy, Nengajo, all of that, those are the things you want to make sure they hear about. You got to be ready in case they ask you about the research, and I have links for that in your resources. And you'll want to invite them to events and let them be the star. Don't forget to thank them for being there and let them speak if they want. And you want to keep your survey data from all these other stakeholders and have it ready. And if you do go in front of the board, you want to have that memorized. So if they say to you like, well, do parents even like this program? You can say, oh yes, 80% of parents said they were highly satisfied with the Japanese program, or whatever it might be. Or, 90% of my students got the seal of biliteracy, something like that. And the community is very similar to the Board of Education, but this is basically your local community. So the most important one here is that you need to understand media relations for your district or your college. Are you allowed to talk to a reporter or not? So reporters might call you. You need to make sure it's okay for you to talk to them. Don't just start talking. And when you do start talking, be positive. Be very, very careful to only be positive, because they'll print the negative in 2 seconds. Share as much as you can with them. Be ready with the language research. Have your survey data. Reach out to your community partners. So like at Yale, I spend a lot of time working with Yale to have them help me with world languages by sending grad students, or they help us with our seal of biliteracy testing. Like if you have a community, or if I had Toyota, I would be constantly asking them if they want to have native speakers come talk, or if my kids can visit there, things like that. Invite the community to events. You can be careful if usually you need a permit, but you can invite the community if you're having a special festival. And you just have to be a constant advocate, even in the grocery store, anywhere. You never know when someone's going to say to you, well, Japanese, why are they learning that? Just be ready with those answers that we talked about at the very beginning. So here we are. So here's your Japanese program. Curriculum, instruction, assessment, and outcomes are all being controlled by you as the pilot. Then you've got advocacy to students, parents, colleagues, administrators of the board, and the community is the propeller that is keeping that airplane going in the air. So I hope we've covered all of that in a way that was helpful for you. And just keep in mind that your propeller, right, has to stay moving. So all those things we talked about, I hate to say it, but you have to keep doing them. I know it's a lot, but without them, the plane will land, the program will land. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna take a break. So we'll all take a break in a minute. Ben is gonna put us all into breakout rooms, they're called, and it will automatically pop up on your Zoom what room you're in, accept it, go into the room, and then mute yourself and walk away. I want everyone to stand up and walk away and do whatever you have to do to release all this sitting energy. Then when you're done with that, you're going to go to this URL, and I'm going to show you it again in a second. It's a tiny URL, but it's also on your handout. So if you got the handout, if anyone still doesn't have the handout, put it in the chat again. I know earlier, but I think Susan put it in the chat. All right, so you go to here, and it's actually a Google quiz that you're going to fill out for you. And I don't need to know who it is. You can put a funny nickname as your name in case there might be an instance where like you want me to find your results later. So you can put some name, or you can put your real name. But if you want to be secret, you can put, you know, Totoro as your name. I don't care. Fill it out. And when you're done, you'll want to say view score. So say view score so you can see how you did. And there's points for each section. And then you can print the results, or you can save it as a PDF, or you can just keep it open in the tab. And this is what it will look like, right? So when you're done, for example, there's a curriculum section, and it'll tell you how many points you got in the curriculum section. And that will help you decide what you might want to work on this year. So if you got, 5 out of 5, then you don't need to work on curriculum. Maybe you want to work on advocacy or instruction. So up here in the section title there, it'll tell you how many. On your handout then is this. So if you want, I'm not going to check, but you could put your score for you to keep. And then if you click on each of the blue underlined ones, those are documents with all kinds of links and resources to help you work on those areas. So every time I said you'll get documents, those are the documents that relate to all those areas. And so that's another thing you could start to do. You might not have time right now, but you could do that another day. So at 2:20, right, after you've had a break and you do your self-assessment, then you'll unmute yourself and discuss in fact, we might adjust this a bit. I think we'll make this, I'm going to change this, everyone, to 2:30, okay? Laura, is that good? Okay, I'm going to make it at 2:30. You'll unmute yourself and come into your breakout room and just talk about it with colleagues, how you did on your self-assessment. We're going to share the things you're doing well. And if you want to talk about one new thing you want to work on next year, right? And then at 2:50, I'll keep track, we will automatically close the breakout room, so you don't have to do anything, and we'll all come back and we'll do a little bit of sharing together. So here's all the directions for now. Again, I'm just putting this again. So from now until 2:30, actually. So now to 2:30, you can take a break and do your self-assessment. And then at 2:30, come back to the breakout room, okay? So right now, Ben's gonna click something and you're all gonna be put in a breakout room, and I will see you back at 2:50 after, right? So take a break and then do your self-assessment at the URL here. Good? So everybody might you either wanna write this down right now, this tiny URL.com/OATJ self-assess, or it's on your handout. It's on your handout on the last page.
I also sent it in the chat.
Okay, it's in the chat. So take that now, because all that chat and this page might disappear when you go in your breakout room. All right? Okay, go take a break. Thanks, everybody.